Saga of the Mary Surratt trial. Like I said, I was going to leave this out, but then I thought I better not. So the point of this is, a lot of these conspirators went on trial, right? But the unique thing about Mary Surratt is she was a female. Okay, now my question to you first of all be this. How would you like to, considering the emotional feelings of the country on the assassination of a very popular president for the most part, how would you like to be the one picked to defend these conspirators? How'd you like that? Would that be a very fun job?
No.
Well, in the story of Mary Surratt, the man that eventually has to defend her was Frederick Aiken. And there's a story behind him that we'll tell you. It's a really interesting story. So Frederick Aiken is the man in the end that has to defend Mary Surratt. Okay? And again, it's not the most popular thing in the world to be defending these, right? Because the country's at a pretty high emotion right now. And just to be honest with you, not only does Edwin Stanton, Secretary of War, but this military commission that's trying these people are looking for a quick and maybe not so fair trial for these people. They want these people taken care of, they want them disposed of, so to speak, convicted, and they want to move on and get this country healed, because Stanton this whole time's been afraid that this assassination was what? Kind of a plot to get the Confederacy going again. And he wants to preserve the Union as Lincoln did. So he's pressing this military commission. The controversial thing about Mary Surratt is she's a civilian, right? The rest of those guys, Surratt, Powell, weren't they Confederate soldiers? So for them to be tried by a military court would seem appropriate. But we'll get ahead of ourselves a little bit, but the point Aiken's going to make is, why are we subjecting a civilian to a military court? Okay? But we'll get to that in a minute. I said that Frederick Aiken was eventually the man that defended her. The man that was first assigned to defend her was Reverdy Johnson. Reverdy Johnson was the first to defend her. And he was an interesting guy, very powerful attorney. At the time that he was to defend Mary Surratt, he was a senator from Maryland. He was a senator from Maryland, and also, kiddos, had served this country as its attorney general as well. So this is a pretty esteemed politician, a sitting senator who's a lawyer, and a former attorney general, Reverdy Johnson, who was originally set up to defend Surratt. Now, he didn't think he could get her a fair trial because he was really upset that this military commission was even trying her. And he made that public. And being he was from Maryland, which was a border state, which the North didn't see as very what? Loyal to the Union, right? They questioned his loyalty. And he did not believe that if he defended Mary Surratt, that she would get a fair trial at all. And as a result of that, Frederick Aiken was kind of his aide or helper. He was also an attorney, but he was helping Johnson. So basically what happened is Reverdy Johnson told Frederick Aiken, I need you to take this case over, because if I continue it, Mary Surratt is not going to have a chance because of loyalty and prejudice issues. What do you think Frederick Aiken's first reaction to getting that news was, Daniel, that he was going to defend Mary Surratt?
He's probably surprised. He didn't really want to do it.
He didn't want to do it. And the ironic thing is, where do you think, what type of person do you think Frederick Aiken was if Reverdy Johnson isn't going to defend her because he's got ties to the South? What do you think he is? A true blue what? Northerner. Matter of fact, he was a pretty heroic captain in the Civil War. He was among the social elite. You know, he was kind of a hero type guy. So Reverdy Johnson picked him because he was just the opposite of what he was. Well, Frederick Aiken looked at that case knowing where it was going, and he said, I'm not doing this. This is not for me. And you know what Reverdy Johnson told him? What is your profession? You're an attorney. Your job, whether you like it or not, is to defend clients assigned to you. And that's what you're going to do, because that's what your job is. That's what you are. You're a lawyer. So he was guilted into taking this case, basically. And he did. And he took it. Okay? Despite the tremendous pressure he was under, and the fact that this military commission wasn't necessarily looking for justice in a fair way. They were looking for revenge in a lot of ways. Does that make sense? And who's pushing the military commission? Edwin Stanton. Okay? So despite these odds, poor odds and pressures, Aiken works extremely hard for Mrs. Surratt. He's working against a very prejudiced military commission who's not looking for fair justice, but more looking for swift justice. Now, even though he took the job, what could he have done if he wanted to? If he wanted to take the easy way out, what could he have done?
I guess turned it down somewhere.
He couldn't, no, he wouldn't, no, he could have just went through the motions and done a half-fast job, right? And just found, she could have been found guilty and that would have been the end of it. And if you'd have put out littler effort, do you think he would have lost popularity in the North? Probably not. But that's not what he chose to do. Once he got into this and saw how prejudiced it was against her, he went full blast, despite his personal consequences. Well, what was his whole case going to be? How in the world was he going to find Mary Surratt not a conspirator and not guilty? What's the only route he has? If you want to prove that she's not, you got to prove that what? Someone else is. And who is he going to go after that's not in the country? Her son, John Surratt Jr. Remember, the day that the decision was made that it went from kidnapping to killing, did what? Where'd he go? Canada. And that's where he's at. The day Lincoln's assassinated, he's in Canada. So Aiken's whole plan is, we've got to make it look like Mary Surratt simply was a boarding house owner. That some of these conspirators actually rented rooms from her, and it was her son that brought these people in there and planned on kidnapping them, killing. That was how he was going to try to work this thing. And she didn't want to cooperate very much because why? It's her son. And then she also had a daughter that was still living with her who ended up testifying against her brother, so to speak, to try to get the mother clear to this. It was a brilliant strategy, okay? Unfortunately, the military commission was so biased that it didn't work, okay? So we know this. She was convicted and sentenced to hang, right? And she was sentenced to hang on July 7th of 1865 at noon, right? I think we told you, I don't know if we told you the time, but we told you she was hanged on July 7th, 1865. So, Frederick Aiken has done everything he can. He's tried to do it the right way. He's tried a different strategy. If John Surratt Jr. shows up, if he comes back, Edwin Stanton said, I'll take any Surratt, I don't care which one. But he never came back, and as a result, the mother was going to pay the price. Now, Aiken does one more last-ditch thing. What's the only way he can maybe save her after she's been convicted and sentenced? Is push what that I said earlier? What? No, but how can he fight any sentence? So what he does is he starts at the last minute looking for what we call a writ of habeas corpus. He's looking for a way out to say, hey, she deserves a trial in a civilian court. She needs to be retried. And the person that you get a writ or a written statement saying, hey, this girl's been wronged, so I'm going to order a new trial, who would do that? A judge, a very influential judge. So picture this. At 3 o'clock in the morning on July 7th of 1865, and she's supposed to hang at noon, right? Frederick Aiken finally gets a Washington, D.C. judge to issue a writ of habeas corpus, which means it's basically a piece of paper that states that he believes that she's been wronged, that she should be tried in a civilian court, not a military court. And when Aiken gets that writ of habeas corpus, she, by law, should get a new trial in front of a civilian jury. Okay? So what does he do after he gets this? What does he go do later that morning? He goes and tells Mary Surratt what? Guess what? I got this writ of habeas corpus, and they're not going to hang you. They're going to give you a new trial. And everybody, she's thrilled. I mean, she thinks she's hanging, and then she thinks she's not hanging. Why did she hang them? Because at 11:30 a.m., 30 minutes before she was to hang, who's the only person that can overrule a writ of habeas corpus? The President of the United States. Word gets from the military commission to the President that a writ of habeas corpus has been issued in her defense, and what does President Andrew Johnson do? Cancels it. 30 minutes before she's hung. And now she finds out she's going to hang again, and 30 minutes later, guess what? She did. But that's the weird saga about the Mary Surratt trial. Does that make sense? So you know Aiken defended her. You know that Reverend Johnson originally was scheduled to do so, but he gave it to Aiken because of the prejudice of him being, quote, looked at as a Southerner from Maryland. And the writ of habeas corpus saved her for a period of hours before Andrew Johnson canceled it and she was hung. It's kind of an interesting story. Now, with that said, there's my point. We know this. We know that 5 of the 9 members recommended that she not be hung because of her gender and age. We know that Johnson didn't take that recommendation because he said that she kept the nest that hatched the egg. Okay? Now, whatever became of attorney Frederick Aiken after this trial? What do you think he did? What do you think he did? He quit law. And he became, ironically, the first city editor of what was then the newly formed Washington Post. Anybody know anything about the Washington Post now? What? One of the most influential newspapers in this country. He was the first city editor for the newly founded Washington Post. So he got out of law and went into journalism. Well, what happened to John Surratt? He went to Canada, we know this, then he went to England, and then he went to Italy, and then he got caught in Egypt and he got brought back, right? That was about 2 years after this, correct? Well, when he's in jail or prison awaiting his trial, John Surratt Jr. calls for Frederick Aiken, ask him to come to the prison. He wants to see him. So after Surratt is brought extradited back to the United States, he's in prison awaiting trial. He calls for Aiken to come and see him. And what's Aiken's first response? He came there, but what did he say to him? Can't really help because I'm not an attorney anymore. And he said, well, I didn't call you for legal advice. I called you here to thank you for the way you treated my mother so kindly. He wanted Aiken to come back and talk to him just so he could thank him for treating his mother so kindly. Then they get in a discussion. And it finally hits John Surratt that if he would have come back, whose life would he have saved? His mother's. But he told Aiken, I just never believed they would hang her. He never believed they would hang a woman. So he never came back. Well, after a conversation like this between the two, Aiken had kept a rosary that Mrs. Mudd had with her the whole time. She was a devout Catholic, and she, clutched to that the entire trial and all the way up through the hanging and everything. And then she gave that and a couple other personal belongings to Aiken when she was hung. Well, what did Aiken do in return when he saw the son? He tried to give them to him. And John Surratt Jr. looked at him kind of sadly, and he said, I want you to keep those. You were more of a son to her than I was. That's what John Surratt Jr. said to Frederick Aiken. You were more of a son to her than I was. And he had him keep her belongings. That's kind of the saga of Mary Surratt. It's kind of an interesting story. Now, it brings me to tell you this, that when I am gone to D.C., the first 3 days I'm gone, I'm going to have Mrs. Schroeffel show you this movie, The Conspirator. I think you will really enjoy it. It'll tell you all the way through the trial, things I've mentioned today, and you'll get an idea and kind of see live what went on in this trial. I think you'll really, really enjoy this. And this is what we're gonna do the first 3 days I'm in DC, and then the next 2 days we'll give you a couple of assignments to do while I'm gone for points. But anyway, this is what we'll watch, so you can prepare to see that. I think you'll really enjoy that. But I wanted to give you that particular bit of information because I think it's important that you know the story of Mary Surratt. Now, was she a non-conspirator? Really? No, she knew what they were doing. And she also gave the binoculars. She's a Southern sympathizer. She said that to Aiken when he first went to defend her. How can I defend you? Because you are, she said, I'm a Southern sympathizer, and she knew. But that was his job, right? And so he tried to do what he could for her, and he couldn't do it. I think the fact if she would have gotten into a civilian court, do you think they'd have found her not guilty? I don't think they would have, but I don't think the sentence would have been as harsh. That's my thought, okay? All right, let's go through the test review now. So we're going to kind of go in order your notes, so get yourself kind of organized, and we'll ask you questions, and hopefully we have our stuff together. We'll start with old Maddie. Here's what I want you to do, Maddie. I want you to tell me one way an individual citizen of the South could receive amnesty from President Lincoln and become a citizen again. Give me one way an individual citizen of the South could receive amnesty from President Lincoln and be able to come back into the Union as an American citizen. There we go. One way would be give an oath of allegiance to the United States. Luke Lamb, what might be another way a citizen could get amnesty?
They would have to accept all federal laws.
Including those including those about slavery, the prohibition of slavery. So they'd also have to accept all federal laws, including those that abolish slavery. That's the important part of that. Very good. Okay. Daniel, give me an example of how a Southern citizen would not be offered amnesty. There were three ways. If you were a Southern citizen and you were involved in any of these three criteria, you could not come back in as a citizen. Lincoln would not offer you amnesty if what? Should be right at the start of your notes. What do you think, Jonathan? Give him a start.
Officers of the military. If you were an officer of the military.
Okay, if you were an officer of the Southern military, you would not be given amnesty. Okay, Luke Mortimer, can you think of another way you would not receive amnesty? One would be if you were served an officer in the Confederate Army, you could not be given amnesty.
Any Southern citizen proven abused prisoners of war.
Right, if you're a Southern citizen, it was proven that you abused prisoners of war. And the third one was, if you served in the Union government and resigned that position and then served in the Confederate government, you could not get amnesty. Yep.
Was it the government or the army?
Well, government. Yep. So, any of those, you're going to need to be able to have one example of how a Southern citizen would not be offered amnesty. Okay? Now, Andy, what was President Lincoln's criteria for a Southern state to be readmitted into the Union? What does Southern state have to do?
10% of the population had signed up.
Okay, remember this, 10% of the population that could vote had to sign pledges. In other words, a 3-year-old couldn't scratch his name. It had to be 10% of the citizens in that state that could vote had to sign a Pledge of Allegiance. Very good. That was it. You went it, pretty much. Okay. Danny, my dear, tell me the two notable radical Republicans that opposed Lincoln's plan for the South. Who were they? Charles Sumner and Thaddeus Stevens were the two radical Republicans I mentioned that opposed Lincoln's plan for the South. Very good. Okay, turn to your notes on the Wade-Davis bill. That's what we're concentrating on now, the Wade-Davis bill. So, Jordy, other than the 10% population deal that we already talked about, give me another requirement, according to the Wade-Davis bill, for a Southern state to get into the Union. What they have to do. Remember, the Congress added this because they thought Lincoln's was too easy. And the Wade Davis bill said, yeah, you gotta have 10% of your voting population pledge your allegiance. What else? Right, southern states had to make an amendment to their constitution that abolished slavery. But I think there was one more. Wasn't there, Carter? You got another one? What is it?
The only way a Southern can hold office is if they were required to remain loyal.
Yeah, the only way a Southerner could ever hold office in the rebuilt United States government is if they were loyal to the Union during the Civil War. Okay, so you're going to need to know two of those three. And population isn't going to be an option. It's going to say other than a 10% population commitment to the Union, name two requirements for a Southern state to be readmitted back into the Union according to the Wade Davis bill. Okay, Aisha, give me a reason why Lincoln vetoed that bill. Give me one reason why he vetoed it.
It was too rigid for Southerners to be part of the Union.
Right, it was too rigid. His goal was to get the states back in. He didn't want to make it harder, he wanted to make it easy, okay? Sage, how about another reason he vetoed it? Right, he thought that we had to have an amendment to the United States Constitution that abolished slavery, not just to each state constitution. Was there any more? I think that was it, wasn't it? Okay, perfect. Okay, Riley. Now this is kind of interesting. Other than simply blaming President Lincoln for the South's problems, why did John Wilkes Booth actually plan the kidnapping of President Lincoln? Why did he do that? What was his motivation? Other than he hated Lincoln and blamed him for it. Okay, a little more specific. He felt guilty because he did not what in the war? He did not fight on the Southern side. He served his time as an actor. So he felt so guilty that he did not fight on the Southern side that the kidnapping plot and trading Lincoln for Confederate prisoners of war